Sophie Cunningham's Insane 2026 Top 10 Countdown. Sophie Cunningham might be having the craziest year of anybody in the WNBA. And I'm not just talking about basketball. In 2026, Sophie has been fined, hit with technical fouls, thrown directly into one of the biggest controversies in women's sports, blasted in the face during a game, dragged into an ugly social media war, backed her coach during an absolute firestorm, and somehow ended up standing on top of a bar singing Toby Keith. Seriously. And remember, we're only in August, so today we're counting down the 10 wildest things that have happened to Sophie Cunningham in 2026. And trust me, the farther we go down this list, the crazier this gets. Let's start at number 10. Number 10, Sophie comes back. Before any of the controversy, fines, hard fouls, or headlines, Sophie Cunningham had something much more important to worry about: getting healthy. Her 2025 season ended early because of a serious right knee injury, and that couldn't have happened at a worse time. Sophie had become one of the most recognizable players on the Indiana Fever. She brought toughness, shooting, energy, and absolutely zero fear of confrontation. But suddenly, her season was over. That made the beginning of 2026 a major question mark. Would Indiana bring her back? The answer came on April 12th. The Fever officially re-signed Sophie Cunningham.
Shoots the ball. I'm a good teammate, and I think I'm a pretty good culture kid, and so I'm so happy to be back here in Indiana. I know that our core is too. I think we can do something really special.
And looking back now, the Fever probably had no idea just how much attention their returning guard was about to attract, because Sophie didn't quietly return to basketball. She came back and almost immediately started collecting headlines. Number 9, the technicals keep coming. If anybody expected Sophie Cunningham to return from injury and suddenly become quiet and reserved, that didn't happen. By June, Sophie had already picked up her third technical foul of the season. And that one came with a little bonus from the league, a reported $500 fine. Now, if you've watched Sophie Cunningham for more than about 5 minutes, this probably isn't shocking. She plays with an edge, she talks, Say hi to my fellow USA Sports, other teammates over there. Argues, she gets into people's faces, and if she thinks something isn't right, you're probably going to hear about it. The knee was healthy, the jumper was back, and apparently, so was the mouth. But here's the funny thing. Underneath all the drama, Sophie was actually playing some pretty good basketball. She's actually producing. This is the part that sometimes gets completely lost, because with Sophie Cunningham, there always seems to be something happening around her. But in 2026, she has also been an important part of Indiana's rotation. Through her first 32 games, Sophie was averaging around 9 points per game while playing roughly 23 minutes a night. That's valuable production from a player who doesn't necessarily need the offense designed around her. She can come off the bench, knock down shots, provide energy, defend, and change the entire attitude of a game. But here's where Sophie's 2026 story gets interesting, because her basketball career was suddenly becoming only one part of her public identity. Outside the arena, Sophie Cunningham was blowing up.
Number 7, her popularity explodes.
When Sophie first entered the WNBA, she was a good player with a loyal fan base. Fast forward to 2026, and she's become something completely different. Her social media following exploded. Her merchandise became increasingly popular. Companies wanted to work with her. And suddenly, Sophie Cunningham wasn't just somebody basketball fans knew. People who barely watched the WNBA knew who she was. And a lot of that momentum began after she arrived in Indiana and became teammates with Caitlin Clark. Sophie developed a reputation as one of the players who wasn't afraid to stand up for her teammates. That made some fans absolutely love her. It made other people absolutely hate her. And honestly, both groups kept clicking. Every confrontation became a clip. Every quote became a headline. Every social media post became a story. Sophie Cunningham had officially entered that strange level of fame where almost anything she did could become news. And then opportunities started appearing that had absolutely nothing to do with basketball. Number 6, Sports Illustrated Swimsuit. Okay, This one definitely wasn't happening on a basketball court. In 2026, Sophie Cunningham officially made her Sports Illustrated Swimsuit debut, and if her popularity was already taking off, this sent it into another gear. Sophie traveled to Captiva Island, Florida, where photographer Catherine Gogan shot her for the 2026 issue alongside fellow athletes Nafisa Collier and Olympic gold medalist Melissa Jefferson Wooden. And yeah, the pictures got people's attention. Sports Illustrated put Sophie on the beach in a collection of swimsuits that showed an entirely different side of the 6'1" WNBA guard. But here's the part you'd never know from looking at the photos. Sophie was absolutely freezing. She later said the shoot was done in what felt like roughly 32-degree weather with nasty conditions rolling through Florida. Meanwhile, the crew around her had parkas, sweaters, hats, hand warmers, and Uggs. And Sophie was standing on a beach in a bikini pretending this was completely normal. Somehow you'd never know it from the finished shots. And for Sophie, this wasn't just another endorsement or publicity appearance. Sports Illustrated Swimsuit had been something she genuinely wanted to do. She called the experience empowering and said appearing in the magazine allowed her to check off a major bucket list goal. And that part of the story matters because Sophie has talked about what it's like growing up as a 6'1" woman with broad shoulders and an athletic build, and having moments where you have to convince yourself to feel confident in your own body. Well, apparently Sports Illustrated took care of that, and when the finished gallery dropped, yeah, subtle wasn't exactly the word for it. Beach shots, ocean shots, white bikinis, black bikinis. Sophie Cunningham had officially gone from WNBA enforcer to Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. And if you thought that was an unexpected place for her 2026 season to take her, just wait. Number 5, Sophie steps straight into a national debate. Up to this point, most of Sophie's 2026 headlines had been about basketball. But then July happened. During an ESPN profile, Sophie Cunningham was asked about transgender athletes competing in women's sports. And Sophie? She didn't dodge it. She said she believes transgender women should not compete against biological women in women's sports. Her argument was that women's sports and opportunities for young female athletes need to be protected. And when the criticism started pouring in, Sophie made something else clear. She said her position wasn't coming from hatred toward transgender people. She said there was room to love everyone. Then came the line that guaranteed this story wasn't going away.
Okay, I said what I said.
Told reporters she wasn't backing down. She called her position common sense and said she was going to remain true to her beliefs. And from there, this thing absolutely exploded. Supporters praised Sophie for publicly saying what they believed other female athletes were afraid to say. Then, the story reached the White House. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt publicly backed Cunningham's position.
The story, as you know, this is something the president feels strongly about as well, and the American people do too, that men should not be playing in women's sports.
Around the WNBA, there was serious pushback. Golden State Valkyries coach Natalie Nakas responded that sports should be about belonging and inclusion, specifically saying that includes transgender women. Minnesota Lynx coach Cheryl Reeve wore a shirt reading, "Trans kids belong." And suddenly, this wasn't just Sophie answering a question anymore. There were rallies, there were counter-protests, there were signs in the stands. And at some Fever Road games, Sophie was hearing boos, while supporters of her position gathered outside the arena. Two completely different reactions, one enormous story. And either way, everybody was talking about Sophie Cunningham. But somehow, 2026 still wasn't finished getting weird. Because the next Sophie Cunningham headline, it had absolutely nothing to do with politics. Number 4, Sophie Cunningham trades the hardwood for the Octagon. Okay, if Sports Illustrated wasn't enough of a career change for one summer, how about the UFC? On July 11th, Sophie Cunningham showed up at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas for UFC 329. And at first, she was just there to watch the fights. But somewhere along the way, Sophie apparently decided that sitting in the crowd wasn't quite enough. She wanted in, and this is where the story gets hilarious. Sophie later explained that Dana White came over to say hello, and she jokingly told him, "Hey, if you need a ring girl, let me know."
"Oh, I want to walk around that up." I said, "Then you're going to walk around it."
No, seriously, and I was like, oh God.
And according to Dana White,
About 8 minutes before she did it,
8 minutes, she went from sitting ringside watching UFC 329 to becoming part of UFC 329. No rehearsal, no weeks of preparation, no giant announcement. Just, hey, Sophie, grab the card. You're up. And sure enough, before the co-main event between Patty Pimblett and Benoit St. Denis, out comes the 6'1" Indiana Fever guard, carrying the round 1 card around the octagon, barefoot, dressed in black, and having an absolute blast with it. But here's what makes this story even better. Sophie wasn't in Las Vegas on vacation. She still had an actual basketball game to play. Less than 24 hours later, Sophie was back in uniform against the Las Vegas Aces, and apparently, a late night at UFC 329 didn't hurt her jumper, because Sophie absolutely lit them up. 20 points, 7 of 9 from the field, and 6 of 7 from three-point range. Indiana destroyed Las Vegas, 109-75. Sophie made more three-pointers by herself than the entire Aces team. And sitting there watching it, Dana White, the same guy who had just turned Sophie into an Octagon girl the night before. And Dana showed up wearing a Sophie Cunningham shirt. Honestly, that's a pretty ridiculous 24 hours. But if you thought walking around a UFC Octagon was unexpected, number 3 was about to take things in an entirely different direction. Number 3, the collision. Sophie versus DiJonai. One play, total chaos. It was August 8th. Indiana was in Chicago battling the sky when, late in the first quarter, Sophie Cunningham broke toward the basket on a fast break. DiJonai Carrington chased her down from behind. Sophie went up for the layup, and Carrington caught her across the head and neck. Sophie crashed to the floor, and when she got back up, she was bleeding, and she was mad. Sophie immediately went straight at Carrington before teammates rushed in and separated them. Officials went to the monitor, watched the replay, and made their decision. Flagrant 2. Carrington was done. She was ejected from the game. But because this was Sophie Cunningham and DiJonai Carrington, there was absolutely no chance this was going to end there. The replay immediately started spreading. Slow motion, zoomed in, frame by frame, and everybody had the same question. Was Carrington making a play on the basketball? Was it reckless? Or was it intentional? Her own head coach, Stephanie White, wasn't so sure. White said she didn't believe Carrington intentionally hit Sophie across the neck, but she agreed the flagrant 2 was the right call. Either way, the image everybody remembered was Sophie standing on that court, with blood around her mouth. But the collision wasn't the end of this story, because Carrington had been thrown out of the game, but she wasn't finished talking, and what she did next turned one brutal basketball play into an absolute media firestorm, and that's number 2. Number 2, the post. 2 words, total firestorm. DiJonai Carrington had just been ejected after her flagrant 2 foul on Sophie Cunningham. But while the game was still going on, Carrington went to social media and posted 2 words that immediately changed the entire conversation. White privilege. Then she tagged the Indiana Fever. That's it. No long explanation, no context, just white privilege. At Indiana Fever. And predictably, the internet absolutely exploded. Some people assumed Carrington was accusing Sophie of benefiting from white privilege. Others believed she was criticizing the officials for ejecting her. And suddenly, people weren't arguing about a basketball foul anymore. They were arguing about race. Sophie was asked about it after the game and made her position clear. She didn't believe race had anything to do with what happened. She pointed out that she had been ejected for a hard foul herself before and essentially said, if you commit a flagrant 2, you're probably getting thrown out. But then Carrington responded to the growing criticism, and she said people were making an assumption. Carrington said she had never claimed that the assessment of her foul was white privilege. It was too late. Those 2 words had already traveled everywhere. Sports shows debated them. Fans argued over them. Social media tore them apart. And one hard foul between 2 WNBA players had somehow turned into a national conversation about race, officiating, and Sophie Cunningham. Again. But the biggest Sophie Cunningham moment of 2026 was something nobody saw coming. Number 1, Sophie took over. And here's the twist. The biggest Sophie Cunningham story of 2026 wasn't one moment. It was the entire damn year. Sports Illustrated, the UFC viral interviews, wild outfits, hard fouls, blood ejections, controversy, and headline after headline after headline. love her, you clicked hate her, you probably clicked even faster because somewhere along the way, Sophie stopped being just another WNBA player. She became a personality, a brand, and one of the most talked about women in basketball. Swimsuit? People watched. UFC round card? People watched. Basketball drama? Oh yeah. People definitely watched. Hell, apparently she can hold a puppy and somehow make that a moment too. That's what made 2026 different. It wasn't one foul, one photo, or one controversy. It was the whole damn ride. And in 2026, Sophie Cunningham took over. And somehow, that's Sophie Cunningham's 2026, at least so far. So which moment should have been number one? Drop it in the comments, and if you enjoyed this one, hit subscribe. We'll see you next time.